More harrowing stories of how people were killed in the Hamas attacks are still emerging.
Israel is now at war with Hamas after this surprise blitz. Hundreds on both sides of the conflict have died, but those numbers continue to rise.
This conflict goes way back, even before the 1900s, which to be honest is enough to form a separate video. But for this video, we're going to be looking at what happened from the 1900s to the present day. If you guys want me to make a video on what happened before that, please leave it down in the comments. So there are two groups of people here. We have the Arabs and the Jewish people. And these two groups had always been at conflict. Why? Jerusalem. Let me explain. Jerusalem is a very crucial and important city in the worship of these two religions. For Judaism, the Jewish people regard Jerusalem as a holy city, the center of the world, where they believe God resided. And as for the Muslims, it is a holy city as well, and according to the Quran, it is where Muhammad, a prophet of Allah, is believed to have ascended on his night journey to heaven. So it's a very important and crucial city in the worship of these two religions. Now, let's look at something else. Before 1948, Jerusalem and pretty much a large portion of the Middle East was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. After World War I happened, they lost control over these territories and Great Britain took over, and part of the territory that they took over was Jerusalem, which was part of Palestine at that time. Now, Palestine was home to three main groups: the Jews, the Arabs, and Christians. And let's just say things between them were still not that good. Why? You might have guessed it. Jerusalem. To make everything worse, there was a high rate of immigration by the Jewish people in Palestine, which made everything worse. These immigrations by the Jewish people were mainly because of the rise of Zionism among the Jews in Europe. What is Zionism, you ask? This was a movement that had come up in response to the widespread anti-Semitism and Arab nationalism in the Ottoman territories. What do I mean by that? So what happened is that at that time, there was a lot of discrimination that was happening to the Jewish people, where they were getting treated differently just because they were Jewish. That is what anti-Semitism was, and Zionism is what they did in response to this, migrating to Palestine, where they believed they could finally live in peace and without discrimination like they were being treated by the rest of the world where they were out there. And Palestine at that time had a majority of Arabs living there, which, as you could imagine, they were not too happy about this, and this just led to conflict. The UN, which had just been formed in 1945, proposed of a way to fix this. They wanted to partition or divide Palestine into an independent Arab state along Jewish states, while Jerusalem would be under international control due to its religious significance for both parties. The Jewish people were in favor of this, but the Arabs were strongly against it, as they felt that it was unfair since they were the majority living in Palestine, and therefore it would be unfair for the Arab people who would be living in Jewish territory under the partition.
The year is 1948, and Israel, which in this case comprised of the Jews, have just declared independence, and the surrounding Arab states were not too happy of this, which led them to attacking them in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israel won and still ended up taking up more territories that previously belonged to Palestine. And it's also approximated that more than 750,000 Palestinians who were previously living in Israel got displaced, while many more fled back to Palestine. The Gaza Strip was occupied by Egypt, while the West Bank was controlled by Transjordan, although they were the ones who were helping Palestine to fight Israel in the war, but they still ended up taking more of their territories. Jerusalem, however, was split between Arab and Israeli forces, where Israel controlled West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem was controlled by Transjordan along with the Old City. This war was succeeded by the 1967 Six-Day War, which, although only lasting for 6 days, had very devastating consequences.
So Israel never had that great of a relationship with the surrounding countries like Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. This time around, it was Israel that launched attacks against these countries, which then led to this one-week war. And remember what I told you, that after the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, Egypt and Jordan controlled some of the Palestinian territories like the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? Well, after this 1 week war, Israel took them while also capturing more territory, like in Egypt, where they took the Sinai Peninsula, East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Note that most of these territories had a majority of Arab population and, in extension, was Palestinian territory. Also, keep Gaza in mind because it also comes to be of importance later in the story. After the Six-Day War and throughout 1973, Syria and Egypt tried to reacquire the captured territories like the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights in the Yom Kippur War. This war was given this name because they launched attacks on the holiest day of Judaism but still failed. However, in 1979, there were peace talks that were held between Egypt and Israel that led to the Camp David Accords, which were brokered by the then US President Jimmy Carter. Israel got the Sinai Peninsula back, and things cooled off for a while. But the Palestinians were still not happy that Israel still remained under control of their land, and they also controlled and mistreated and killed innocent Palestinians. And through the leadership of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, which was a coalition that comprised of people who wanted the independence of Palestine, which then led to the First Intifada of 1987. There were two intifadas that happened. This was the first one, and another one that I'll tell you about in a second. The Palestinians basically wanted freedom over their land, which the Israeli people still occupied at that time, which made them to continue with this rebellion over the next 6 years, where approximately 2,000 people lost their lives. This was also around the period where a group known as Hamas was formed by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, which sought to reclaim Muslim territory that had been previously taken from them. And right off the bat, Hamas hated Israel and sought for its destruction. Also, around this period of the First Intifada, with the help of the United States and other nations, Israeli and Palestinian leaders began negotiations, which sought to end the conflict. This was finalized by the Oslo Accords of 1993, where basically Palestine was allowed to self-govern itself in the West Bank and Gaza, and a Palestinian Authority was established as the government. Israel agreed to withdraw from there, and in turn, the Palestinian Liberation Organization recognized it as the state and the right of its people to live in peace. But this never solved anything for long because in the early 2000s, the second Intifada happened. And this one was different as it involved more bloodshed as compared to the first one, where more than 4,000 people lost their lives, which was more than double as compared to the first one. And remember Hamas? Well, it appears that according to the Oslo Accords, the party which got to govern the West Bank and Gaza recognized Israel as a state. But the people did not like this, and so did Hamas. So in the 2006 elections, the people chose Hamas as their government. But the other countries said no, we are not going to recognize you as a government. Why? Because Hamas was always at war with Israel. It was always at an armed confrontation with it, which is the total opposite of what everybody else wanted. And what is that exactly? Peace. Everybody wanted peace. But Hamas wanted to see Israel destroyed. So what happened? Well, the US organized a way to try to reinstate or revert back to the old government, which was led by Fatah, and things got ugly as a civil war emerged. But Hamas won and they got to keep and govern Gaza, while Fatah got to govern the West Bank. But remember that Hamas doesn't like Israel, and Israel isn't too fond of them as well. So what happened? They fought. And this is exactly what happened from 2008 all the way to 2014. So they fought for like 6 years straight, but what made them stop here? Well, a few months before this, they'd agreed to a ceasefire, but someone got sneaky, and that someone was Israel. They completely raided Gaza in a ploy which they had to try and kill Hamas militants. And to make it worse, the UN also came to realize that they'd used something called white phosphorus, which isn't good. It isn't good for people, and to make it worse, they'd used it in areas where civilians were located. So pretty innocent people got exposed to this stuff, which according to the WHO causes severe burns when it comes into contact with the skin and eyes. So imagine someone inhaling this stuff, like children and other innocent people. But Hamas had also been up to no good because they'd also launched rockets from Gaza to Israel. And this crossfire went on between them for a while, where in 2014 Egypt helped to broker a ceasefire between them, but this left some problems. Now Gaza was like completely destroyed and was left with shortages in basic necessities, not to mention the blockade that Israel had set up to protect themselves from attacks from Hamas. But this also cut off movement of goods between the two places. Mind you that Gaza had nothing to its name at this point, and conflicts continued to show up, as like we said before, Jerusalem is really important to the Muslims and Jews alike, so conflicts continued to show up, especially during the worship of the two religions. And on October 7th, 2023, a very important day for the Jews, Hamas launched rockets at Israel, killing more than 1,400 people, which the government of Israel immediately recognized as war and in turn launched airstrikes at Gaza, killing more than 5,000 people. This is still a developing issue which is still happening till date at the time of the recording of this video, but you can help out by supporting the people in Palestine using the link in my description or in the pinned comment. I'd really appreciate it if you did, and I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe. Peace out.